Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video we'll be having a look at the changes to the phases in 10th edition Warhammer 40,000. We're going to see some big changes to the psychic and morale phases, and some are good, some I'm not quite sure about, but in this video we'll explore them all and have a look through everything that's been updated in the recent article. We also got to see this guy earlier in the week, the new Terminator Librarian. Awesome looking model. I think this is going to be a great addition to the new range as well. Really looking forward to seeing this on the table. He's chapter agnostic, so you can use him with any chapter, and he's armed with the Force Axe, which I think really suits the model and looks awesome. As cool as he looks though, I don't think he comes anywhere near as good as my Njal Stormcaller for the Space Wolves. I'll be sticking with that. But for any of the other chapters, especially if you're running Terminators, this is going to be a great addition. Alright, let's start having a look at the phases then, and we've got the description here of the battle round, and you'll notice that the 7 phases that used to exist have now been condensed into 5 phases. Players are also still going to take their turns in the same way, so one player will take the first turn and they're going to move and fight with all of their units, and then the second player will do the same. In the command phase, it tells us that both players muster strategic resources, then test your unit's battle readiness. So you're going to do the same thing, do all your admin here, go through your stratagems, that kind of thing. That's all going to be done in the command phase as normal. But there is one addition, and that's going to be the morale phase. Now, instead of being at the end of the battle round, that's going to take place in the command phase, and this is now called Battle Shock. The idea with this is to simplify morale. So in the command phase, you'd have to take a battle shock test for any units that have taken enough losses. So let's have a look at exactly what it entails and all the details. You can see here it tells us that in this step, you must take a battle shock test for each of your units on the battlefield that is below half strength. To do so, roll 2d6. If the result is greater than or equal to the best leadership characteristic in that unit, the test is passed. Otherwise, the test is failed, and until the start of your next command phase, that unit is battle shocked. This means we'll be looking for leadership characteristic that's really low. So the lower the characteristic, the better, whereas before, leadership used to be higher the better. So a little bit of a change there, but now we want it as low as possible. Let's have a look at what happens if you fail the test. So that means if you fail, the unit will be battle shocked. And while a unit is battle shocked, there's 3 things that affect them. Number 1, the objective control characteristic of all of that unit's model is now reduced to 0. If it falls back, you must take a desperate escape test for every model in that unit. And 3, its controlling player cannot use stratagems to affect that unit. So that's quite harsh. At least they don't run away at least, but that's quite a lot of restrictions there. They're not going to hold objectives. You can't buff them with stratagems. Yeah, and then there's that desperate escape test too. Now, it's not clear exactly what this desperate escape test means, but potentially you could lose models if you try and fall back. That could be something they build into it, so that'll be interesting. We'll have to wait and see. We've seen the first phase, the command phase. Now it's time to look at phase number 2, the movement phase. This hasn't changed at all. This is going to remain the same. Your units maneuver across the battlefield and reinforcements enter the battle. Phase number 3 is the shooting phase, and it tells us here your units fire their ranged weapons at the foe. But there's more to this now, because you'll notice the psychic phase has gone. It's not included in the 5, and that's because psychic powers are now going to be used throughout the other phases. And some examples they've given us are, for example, in the command phase, if you wanted to do something like peer into the future for tactical insights, that's an ability that you would use in the command phase. But if you were going to paralyze foes with something like hypnosis, that'll come in the fight phase. But anything like ranged attacks, so any ranged psychic attacks that target units, that's going to be done in the shooting phase, and that's alongside and in addition to any other ranged weapons they can use in the shooting phase. The idea of this is to make it simpler. I'm not sure if it does. I'm not sure if this makes it simpler or more complicated. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section below. But I actually like the psychic phase being separate. One thing they say in the article, it's boring waiting for your opponent to do the psychic phase. I find it quite interesting. Yeah, you can't do anything and you certainly feel helpless, but doesn't that reflect the narrative? I'm not sure. Let me know what you think down below, but the jury's out for me on this one. My first thoughts are this could be a little bit untidy and you're going to have to remember certain things for certain units in many of the phases now rather than just one or two. Next up, we've got the fourth phase, which is the charge phase. Units charge forward to battle at close quarters, so no changes there. And then the fifth and final phase, the fight phase, where both players pile in and attack with melee weapons, or at least their units do. We don't want to see players piling in. That's going a bit far, and that's a completely different game. Alright, that's the phases. Let's have a look at some of the data cards for the Librarian and a Weird Boy, two examples they gave us in the article, and we'll just see a bit more about how Psychic's going to work in these different phases. So here we've got the Librarian and Terminator armour, we can see his data sheet, and you can see here that under the ranged weapons section, you've got Smite, and that's a psychic weapon. Normally, or currently in 9th edition, you would use Smite in the Psychic phase, but now you're going to be using Smite in his shooting phase. You'll see there's two options for Smite, and this is because it's going to work quite similarly to how plasma weapons work. So you can either choose to manifest a controlled mental burst, or go for a Psychic onslaught that could backfire. And I suspect that there's going to be some conditions there. If it backfires, you're probably going to take some damage. Here's another difference over on the ability section. You can see that you've got Psychic Hood. It tells us while this model is leading a unit, models in that unit have the Feel No Pain 4+ ability against psychic attacks. So this is nice, I quite like this, whereas before you'd use a stratagem to add a buff to a unit. Just by putting this model on attaching them to a unit, so they're leading that unit, then that unit automatically gets the buffs from the abilities this model come with. That's nice, that makes things quite simple, so you're not having to worry about casting the spell or doing the psychic ability each time in the psychic phase. It's just automatically on the unit when they're leading it. I really like that. That's my favourite part of the changes to the psychic powers. And here's another ability. While this model is leading a unit, weapons equipped by models in that unit have the Sustained Hits 1 ability. Again, nice and simple. Just by being in there, that unit's going to have that ability for as long as this model is leading the unit. The Librarian's also got the melee weapon, Force Weapon, Psychic. So it doesn't say you have to roll those 2d6 anymore for any of these. You're just going to use them as a weapon by the looks of things. That's quite simple. But again, I did like that element. It just made it a little bit different when you had Psychers. Something else in there that was a little bit interesting and a different mechanic that sets them aside. Now I fear that Smite will just blend in and just be another ranged weapon. And you'd almost think of it as a kind of gun rather than a psychic power. And that might take away from the narrative a little bit. I'm not sure. But here's what I'm thinking. Because the Force Weapon has got the psychic keyword, and so has Smite Witchfire, and also has Focused Witchfire, because of the Psychic Hood ability, if for example you were attacking another unit that had a Librarian and Terminator armor with the Psychic Hood ability, they would get a 4+ Feel No Pain against the Force Weapon and Smite. So that's quite interesting. I'm sure that's how it's worded. That's what it sounds like to me anyway. Let me know what you think down below. The next example we've got is the Weird Boy, and you'll notice that under his ranged weapons, all he has is his psychic power. This Headbanger is classed as a shooting attack according to the article, and again I don't like that, it doesn't feel right. It comes away from the idea of psychic being something different to shooting. But anyway, it says that the shooting attack grows in power and volatility according to how many boys he has in his entourage. So that's going to tie us into an ability, so let's have a look at that now. And here it says, while this model is leading a unit, add 1 to the strength and damage characteristics of this model's Headbanger weapon for every 5 models in that unit, rounding down. But while that unit contains 10 or more models, that weapon has the hazardous ability. So that's going to work similar to the plasma weapons. The more boys are in there because of that War Energy ability. The Weird Boy's also got another psychic ability called the Jump, and once per turn, at the end of your movement phase, so here we go, so it's not just command shooting and fighting, you're actually going to use this psychic power at the end of your movement phase. One Weird Boy from your army can use this ability. If it does, roll 1d6 on a 1, that Weird Boy's unit suffers d6 mortal wounds. on a 2+, remove this weird boy's unit from the battlefield and set it up again anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches horizontally away from all enemy models. Again, this doesn't make it simpler to me. If we did it in the psychic phase, at least you know exactly you've got to do all your psychic powers there. But doing it at the end of the movement phase, there's potential there for it to be overlooked. And if you've got lots of psychics with lots of different psychic abilities that come up in different phases, there's a fair bit to manage there. Not that it's not going to be doable, but I just think that it's going to leave room for error, and there's going to be times where those psychic abilities could be forgotten. There we go then, that's the update for the phases. I've got to say, I like what they've done with Battle Shock. I really like that. That makes it a lot more interesting. But with Psychic, I just feel like that's put it all over the place, and I don't think it's made it simpler based on what I've read in the current article. Could be wrong. We really need to get playing to try it out. But let me know what you think. What do you think about the changes to Psychic powers especially, and to the phases? Let me know in the comments down below. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. So far we've seen loads of great updates for 10th edition for the new Warhammer 40,000. I've covered it all on the channel here in loads of videos if you'd like to check those out. But this is the first time I've been a bit dubious about it, and so I'm not sure what's going to be going on and how these psychic actions and abilities are going to work. But we'll have to wait and see. But otherwise, the other changes I'm really excited about. I think it's got a lot of promise. But again, we'll have to wait and see until we get hold of the box. But at the end of the month, we'll finally see the contents, hopefully some more details about the rules, and I'll be covering that here on the channel too. But until then, thanks so much for watching the video. Hope you liked it. If you did, please hit the like button. If you've been enjoying the videos lately, it would be awesome if you consider subscribing, and I look forward to seeing you here next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games. Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters for helping me to keep going with these regular videos. I couldn't do this without you, and I appreciate your support so much. If you'd like to join the Patreon community, support the channel, get some great perks at the same time, there's a link down below in the description. It'll be awesome to see you there.